The chamber itself seemed to recede into darkness. The silver lamps continued their steady glow around the circular room, casting pale reflections across polished black stone and the smooth surfaces of the glass display cases surrounding the gathering. Within those cases rested relics that had survived the passing of centuries, preserved with extraordinary care by generations who understood that memory was often more fragile than stone. Yet none of those artifacts held the attention of the Order now. The wonder of the spiral vault had already passed, and the long descent through its spiraling depths was complete. The artifacts had been observed with patience and respect, their histories contemplated and their resonances felt. Now the attention of every listener, witness, and rememberer rested upon something older still. Every mirrored mask reflected the same thing, the ancient volume resting upon the table. For centuries, the Keeper records had remained sealed beneath crystal glass, protected from dust, from age, and from the countless hands that might have worn them away. They had endured while the city above expanded and changed. They had survived the passing of generations, the rise and fall of traditions, and the quiet transformation of a civilization that no longer fully understood the people who had first written those pages. Now, for the first time in longer than anyone present could truly comprehend, one of those volumes lay open beneath the silver light, and every observer in the chamber understood that they were standing at the edge of a conversation that had begun long before any of them had been born. The oldest rememberer rested their hands lightly upon the ancient pages and allowed the silence to settle around them. No one hurried the moment. The chamber itself seemed patient, as though even the stone understood the significance of what was about to occur. Then with infinite care the rememberer began to read. "We record these observations because memory is failing." The words entered the room softly. No one reacted immediately. The sentence was allowed to settle among the gathering, and for a time the only sound came from the distant hum of the preservation systems and the faint whisper of silver lamps burning steadily. Throughout the vault, the rememberer continued, "Not ours." A page shifted softly beneath their fingertips. The world's. Something changed within the atmosphere of the chamber. The resonance emerged gradually, not as a sudden sensation but as an emotional landscape, unfolding around the gathered circles. The feeling carried the weight of responsibility. Beneath it lingered exhaustion, determination, and the quiet persistence of people who had spent years confronting a problem larger than themselves. Several observers lowered their heads. Others closed their eyes. The oldest rememberer simply listened. Patience had always been one of the first lessons of the Order. Meaning rarely revealed itself immediately. Observation required stillness. Understanding required time. Eventually, a listener spoke. They sound afraid. Their voice was quiet, yet it carried clearly through the stillness. No one corrected them. No one agreed. The observation was simply allowed to exist. After a few moments, the oldest rememberer raised their gaze. "What do you observe?" The listener remained silent. They listened again. Not to the words themselves, but to the resonance surrounding them. The emotional atmosphere continued to drift through the chamber, carrying fragments of something preserved across centuries. Finally, the listener shook their head. No. The chamber waited. Not afraid. Silver light moved gently across the mirrored surface of their mask as they turned toward the open volume. It feels like certainty. A subtle shift passed through the gathering. Several witnesses turned their attention toward the speaker. The listener continued. They are not wondering whether something is wrong. Their voice grew softer. They already believe something is wrong. The observation settled heavily among the gathered circles. One of the rememberers folded their hands within the sleeves of their dark robes and inclined their head slightly. An observation. The listener lowered their head. Yes. The oldest rememberer returned their attention to the page. They continued to record despite that certainty. A witness spoke from somewhere beyond the silver light. Why? The question drifted into the room and remained there. Not a challenge. An invitation. A younger listener considered the question carefully before answering. Because they hoped to understand it. The witness remained thoughtful. Or because they feared others would not. Neither answer felt complete. Yet neither felt wrong. And throughout the chamber, the Order sat quietly with both possibilities, listening not only to the words of the keepers, but to the thoughts they awakened centuries later. The oldest rememberer turned the page. The ancient parchment whispered softly against itself. a fragile sound that seemed impossibly loud within the stillness of the chamber. The silver light resting upon the table illuminated lines of handwriting that had survived centuries of preservation. Though the script belonged to another age, generations of careful translation had ensured that the meaning remained accessible to those who followed. For a few moments, the rememberer simply studied the page. Around them, the gathered circles waited. No one hurried the process. The order had long understood that silence often revealed as much as speech. Eventually, the rememberer began reading once more. The roads remain. The words settled gently into the chamber. The towers remain. The resonance shifted, not dramatically, subtly, like the movement of distant weather beyond a horizon. The mechanisms remain. Several observers exchanged thoughtful glances. The city described by the keepers felt strangely familiar. Roads, towers, mechanisms, the foundations of daily life, the things people relied upon so completely that they rarely considered them at all. The oldest rememberer continued. Yet increasingly, people remember different histories for the same places. Silence followed. The words seemed to linger in the air long after they had been spoken. The resonance deepened. Confusion surfaced beneath the determination and responsibility already present within the emotional landscape. It was not the confusion of ignorance. It felt more like the confusion of certainty being challenged. A listener frowned slightly. They were documenting divergence. The observation drifted through the room. A witness turned toward them. "What do you observe?" The listener considered carefully before answering. The structures remain unchanged. Their gaze remained fixed upon the page. The disagreement exists within memory. Several members of the order nodded slowly. The witness gestured for them to continue. The listener took a breath. They are not describing destruction. The chamber listened. They are describing inconsistency. A thoughtful silence settled across the room. The oldest rememberer lowered the page slightly, allowing the observation to breathe. The resonance responded. Fragments of emotion drifted through the gathering. Uncertainty, frustration, the growing discomfort of people encountering evidence that did not fit their understanding of the world. One of the witnesses finally spoke, as though reality had ceased agreeing with itself. The words settled heavily among the circles. No one challenged them. No one accepted them outright. The observation simply joined the others, becoming part of the conversation. The oldest rememberer returned their attention to the record. There are now reports from every district. Their voice carried the words of the keeper across the centuries. Citizens increasingly recall places they have never visited. The chamber grew quieter. The rememberer continued. They describe streets that do not exist. A listener slowly lifted their head. Houses that were never built. The resonance deepened once more. Conversations that never occurred. The oldest rememberer paused. The room seemed to contract around the words. Then came the final sentence. Yet many of the descriptions are identical. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The listener who had spoken earlier lowered their gaze. I do not understand. The admission carried no embarrassment. Within the order, uncertainty was not weakness. It was the beginning of observation. A witness folded their hands within their sleeves. What troubles you? The listener thought for several moments. If a memory is false, it should be unique. The chamber listened. If many people remember the same thing, they hesitated. The thought itself seemed difficult to articulate. Then where did the memory come from? The question settled into the silence. Several observers found themselves returning to the passage. Not the words, the implication. The oldest rememberer remained motionless beside the table. The mirrored surface of their mask reflected the ancient pages, the silver light above, and the gathered circles standing quietly around them. Finally, one of the rememberers spoke. Perhaps the keepers asked the same question. The room became still. The resonance shifted once more. Beneath the confusion, beneath the responsibility, beneath the growing sense that something fundamental was changing, another feeling lingered. Curiosity, the feeling of standing before a mystery so vast that no single observer could hope to understand it alone. The oldest rememberer gently closed one hand upon the edge of the page. The keepers believed they were witnessing the beginning of a catastrophe. Their voice remained calm, measured, respectful. They may have been correct. The words settled softly into the chamber. Then the rememberer looked around the gathered circles. Silver reflections moved across 100 mirrored faces. But observation requires humility. The room listened. The possibility that they were wrong must remain open. Silence followed, deep and thoughtful, and somewhere within the resonance, preserved between the lines of the ancient record, another possibility seemed to stir. Not the ending of a world, not the breaking of reality. Something else. Something the keepers had sensed, but perhaps never fully understood. Something waiting patiently beneath the fracture, waiting to be remembered.